too long, right?
Test.
Need to get my chip.
We're reconvening as Wicomico County Council in legislative session 2025-08. Yes, for April 15th, 2025. First item on the open work session for the council is, hang on a second, let me get here. All the way down here. Yeah, proposed housing action items. We have Ms. Molly Hilligoss, Chief Executive Officer of Habitat for Humanity of Wicomico County Incorporated. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. And I just want to first thank you guys for your service and dedication. What you do is so critical for the families that we serve and for your constituents. So thank you for that. So you guys are aware, everyone's aware that we are in a housing crisis. What you may not be aware of is that the cost of housing has more than doubled in the last 10 years. And so you've got, you can see in the packet that we have, back 10 years ago, we sold a home on Martin Street for $97,000. The houses that we're selling now are $272,000. So we are required to sell homes at fair market value. The fact that homes have doubled in price and salaries have not is truly a problem. And so the affordability gap is really the reason why I'm here, is to talk about solutions on how we can help more families become homeowners. And so the first easy solution, I mean, this is really low cost. If you were to offer a short-term property tax credit to Habitat for Humanity of Wicomico County and Salisbury Neighborhood Housing or any other housing agency for a short-term period of no more than 5 years, that would help us offset some of our costs, our carrying costs, when we acquire homes, that either homes or land that we're going to eventually rehab or build new and sell. So the impact right now to the county budget would be, I'm estimating a little over $3,000 for FY26. It's a very small ask. But what it would do long-term, it would give us the opportunity to want to acquire more properties. We would love the opportunity to purchase a package of, say, 10 homes from a retiring landlord. If you know any, send them my way. And that way we could purchase that package of homes and then rehab them and then resell them to low-income families that want to become homeowners. In front of you, as a handout, this is an illustration of the affordability gap right now. So we serve families that earn between 30 and 80% of the area median income. And so in this illustration, I'll just use the first example of the 60% AMI scenario. So a family of four that earns 60% of the area median income is $56,208. The maximum loan that they can obtain to purchase a home is $159,000. With the median listing price, so if they were to just want to buy a house on the open market, that is going to run them at least $299,000 for something decent that's livable. So if they can only get the loan for $159,000, the affordability gap is $139,949. That's a problem. So when you add in what they would need for down payment and closing costs, the total needed is $157,889. In this illustration, it's providing an example of a $40,000 down payment assistance opportunity that could be funded through the cannabis tax revenues. That would still, in the case of Habitat, if we were selling a house for $299,000, we would still need to provide a silent third mortgage for $117,000 to make that work for that family. That scenario is not sustainable and it does not work for Habitat. We don't have that type of, revenue sitting there waiting to do silent third mortgages. The scenario improves when the family has higher income. Clearly, when you move over to the next illustration for a family of 4 and 80% AMI, they can afford more in terms of the home loan of $233,000. There's still an affordability gap, but with a down payment assistance of $40,000, and if they happen to be law enforcement or in education or in healthcare, and they earn under that 80% AMI, they can qualify for a $20,000 down payment assistance through First Shore Federal's. They have a special down payment assistance program when the funding is available, of course, through the Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta. So then that can provide that. Then we would ultimately provide that third silent mortgage, could be even down to $23,000. So that becomes a much more feasible solution. I know these numbers can be complicated and dizzying, and but this is the problem that families are having right now, is that this affordability gap in getting the mortgages with current pricing. Okay. I know it was a lot. We have, in the last 10 years, we've improved 27 lots and properties, increasing assessed values by over $2.8 million, which is tremendous for property taxes. And there are other habitats statewide that are receiving these types of property tax credits, from their counties. So you have an example from Cecil County. And what questions do you have for me?
How's it working in Cecil?
It's working great. They are building and selling more than 5 houses a year. So right now we're averaging about 3. If we could get double our capacity to serve, just serve more families faster. I mean, it costs so much to build. I mean, we're looking at the 2 houses that we're selling on Gray Street, $250,000, just our cost to build. That's a lot. Yeah, and it's not going down. I mean, tariffs are, if the federal tariffs end up coming and impacting us, it will mainly be lumber.
Yeah.
So far, drywall, we can source that here in the United States, which is a large expense. But the lumber is the biggest issue.
This is a great thing that you all do, and home ownership is something people should take a lot of pride in. But along with that, of course, comes responsibility. I guess today we got the budget, so already we're going to get a tax decrease. It's going from 84 cents down to 80. I'm worried about the precedent it sets when we start giving tax breaks to nonprofits. And a few years ago, it was Shore Up came to us. It was Shore Up over on Snow Hill Road and wanted to be relieved of the tipping fees. They were taking down some trees and I think an old building, and they wanted to be relieved of the tipping fees. We decided against that because it would set a precedent. And if I was going to give tax breaks to anybody, I'd rather see somebody that's been paying. When the Ross building came up a few years ago, I had a lady on Camden Avenue call me. She said, I've been on Camden Avenue, my entire life. When my husband and I got married, we've never had a tax break. And she said, we've been paying double taxes, city and county both. If we were going to give some kind of tax break, and I know there was a homestead tax, but I'd rather see us do that. But I do thank you for what you do, but I can't go along with that. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, we appreciate you being here and bringing this forward. You're doing a lot of really good work in the community. And I think I've shared with you before in private in conversations that we've had as well, that there's a concern about nonprofits and the county actually getting involved in contributing to nonprofits and funding nonprofits, because there's so many out there. As Joe says, it could create a bit of a conflict for us when someone else comes in here next week with another nonprofit and says, we'd love you to give us a tax break on something. Puts us in a bit of a bind. One avenue, I think, possibly as far as perspective, is sometimes what it's all about. I could look at this. To me, it's a minimum amount of money when you're talking about maybe just 5 houses in a 5-year period of time. We need to know, I guess, maybe a better idea of the exact number of properties and the exact cost it might be. But I think it's relatively, as far as taxing and as far as expenses, it's manageable. It's very manageable compared to our budget. One aspect I try to take into consideration in reference to just not Habitat, but also with Salisbury neighborhood housing, is that a lot of your progress is rehabilitating neighborhoods. And to me, that's more of an economic development aspect to it. Not that we don't want to help people who are in need, but I think it's twofold benefit, I think, here, not just getting housing for individuals, but I think we should look at also the economic development advantages that could possibly be considered.
Absolutely. I mean, for every house that we build, we're generating and saving 17 jobs. You figure we're not using volunteer labor. We are hiring contractors that build to code. So and housing is it's a nationwide economic driver.
And you're also restoring neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
Because the first thing you do, and you go into these areas that are dilapidated, you see houses that are actually a very high quality house, and in many instances that could be attributed to your organization, or that could be attributed to Salisbury Neighborhood Housing, who puts your own investments into this project, and the entire value of the neighborhood can increase. Could help reduce the level of crime in that neighborhood. So there could be very many benefits without just saying that this is just a giveaway to a nonprofit, if you follow me.
Absolutely, yeah. And with the housing crisis that we're in, I mean, this is a minuscule amount of assistance. It's a small tax credit. The city of Salisbury has already offered it for the city properties. It would show that you guys care about affordable housing and for families that, desire to become homeowners.
I think we care.
It's a matter of, yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I'm sorry. We care, okay? Don't put that on our backs that we don't care. I don't appreciate that statement. But I've watched Habitat for Humanity for years, and even Jimmy Carter was involved in it. They went out and built houses and got volunteers. And now you're saying, and I know that at one time the people that were getting these houses had to put sweat equity in to build them. Now you're saying you're hiring contractors, so you've got away from that.
We still use volunteer labor for painting and installing trim, but anything that's related to code, because of the you have to build a code. And
I understand that, but it's that statement that we don't care, but we care about everybody, the whole county, not just one group. So. Anyway.
James?
What happens after the 5 years? If they're having trouble paying for the taxes now, what happens after 5 years? Do they foreclose?
But this isn't a tax credit to the homeowner. This is a property tax credit while we're redeveloping the properties. It's only while we're redeveloping, so it may not even be a full 5 years.
So it might be like 6 months.
It could be.
Depending on the rehab project. Yeah. And then you sell the property.
And then
they are responsible for
full tax.
Okay, but you're asking, just so I'm wrapping my head around it, you're asking for a pause on taxes while you refab a home.
That's correct.
And then you sell it. Now, it's just
It's just very temporary. I mean, our holding cost, you figure right now we have 10 properties. We have to, cut the grass and all the other, everything that, remove any trash, whatever,
Is there?
I mean, this tax credit doesn't even cover our cost of cutting the grass for a year.
I'm just saying, do we have like a time frame? I'm just speaking, do we have let's just say that we go through with this and we give you a tax break on the property and we say you've got 6 months to work on it with tax, without having to pay taxes on it. After that, then you are going to have to be required to pay taxes on it. Is that something that was thought of, or are we just going to give you a tax break until it's fixed?
My suggestion was just up to 5 years, not to exceed 5 years. So
5 years.
it,
Okay.
the information I gave you that had the increase in the property values, you can see the number of years it takes with our current model, whether it was a rehab or a recycle or new construction. So the rehabs, they typically can take anywhere from a year to 3 years, depending on our funding to rehab them and put them back on, into homeownership. But the houses that we're just finishing up right now on Gray Street, from the time we acquired the lot to now is 10 years.
Yeah.
So it just costs more money when you have to build from the ground up than if you, purchase an existing house and rehab it.
Yes, Josh.
So I guess just the question there would be there would be a program where we'd have a max, a cap on whatever that amount might be or something like that. I think overall this makes a lot of fine sense. We're trying to help as a, nonprofit group, trying to get folks in houses, get them to own houses. That is what's important. That's what's necessary. If we can temporarily facilitate that as a county, then that's a positive thing. There's certainly never been a time potentially in American history where there's been this much of a challenge with housing and with the cost of housing. So if that were a capped amount or something like that, where we could, just like you would at state level, you could say, okay, well, first, what, not to exceed this amount, or, maybe that could be a helpful way to get at it. But
That's a good suggestion.
But one way or another, it's that way we'd have some stability and understanding what that cost actually is, as opposed to just dismissing it. But I think in general, it's don't we need to be figuring out ways to be much more helpful in this? And is this not the time that it's that has been arguably the worst in history? So
Absolutely, and in the fact that I had a meeting with county executive and we workshopped this whole this challenge, and she suggested the cannabis tax revenue for part of the suggestion, which was the down payment assistance piece, which I thought was great.
You're going to be eligible for the cannabis revenue, correct?
We can apply for it.
Yeah.
Other properties appear to be in probably tier 4 and tier 5
Right.
neighborhoods. That's the only areas where you would qualify for that.
Yeah.
And the thing is that it would not be ongoing. It would only be for 1 year
Correct.
with the cannabis. And I don't know how they've established anything beyond that 1 year, but it's.
Does the county executive endorse this idea?
Yes, she was in favor of both, so.
I didn't see her name on it. Is her name on it?
Any other questions?
Yeah,
Yes.
I have a question.
Jenny?
I'm looking at the income on your family of 4. Well, people don't make that kind of money, 74,000 on the 80%.
Some do.
56.
Some do. If you have two working, like if you have a mom and a dad that both have full-time jobs, it's rare that we see that income that high for our program.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But we have seen that. Most of our families right now are in that 65,000 annual income.
Do you know when you're going to get out of the Church Street area?
We are looking to acquire more properties, but I don't want to acquire more properties unless I have some type of incentive that will help carry the carrying costs. That's why I'm here. So it doesn't make sense for me to, take out a loan and buy more properties if the carrying cost is going to be really high.
Any other comments you'd like to make? It's just
So what's the next step?
Well, I guess we'll have to revisit it. We'll have to sort of get a feel for where everybody is. We're not going to make a decision exactly in a work session, but we'll have to, I guess, talk amongst ourselves and try to figure out what we might want to do, and then we would revisit that with you. I will certainly let you know, Mrs. Hurley will let you know what the inclination might be with the council. With the first work session where it's still fresh, I think, in the minds of everybody, I don't want to come to a consensus immediately. So we would either have a second work session where we would discuss it or try to maybe consider a resolution and discuss it in further and then either vote it up or vote it down. So there could be two alternatives to that.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Item we have on the agenda. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Next item we have on the agenda is a water and sewer plan amendment for Reagan's Run subdivision.
Where's that at?
Wilkins, how are you?
Good, how you doing, sir?
Good. If you could state for the public, for the record also, your title
yeah.
and your name and your title. Thank you.
Brian Wilkins with Wicomico County Public Works Engineer.
Okay. You've given us the work. We've had a chance to review it. If you want to just give us an overview, that would be great.
Yes, sir. So this is a water sewer plan amendment request for the Reagan's Run subdivision. It's located Riverside Drive Extension. It's a little west of Sharps Point Road. And so, and I have to point out, there's a little bit of a discrepancy in the request here. I actually just noticed it. The water designation is currently is W6, so really the request is only to amend the sewer designation from S4 to S6. And give a little background with this. Back in 2006, the owner had requested this to be amended to provide I believe it was a community sewer system, so it could get more lots in there. I guess apparently now that's not feasible, so hence this request to go back to S6 and do individual well and septic systems. So that's what we have here today. I'll entertain any questions. If you need any more info.
From anyone? So what we're trying to do is, right now it's a tier 4.
Yeah, the sewer designation is tier 4,
And
which I
this
think
is
is 5 years off, is the estimate, the when sewer service will be available.
We're sort of amending, is it a tier 3 or tier 4?
You're 6 right now, right?
Tier,
It's 4,
it's 4, okay.
S4.
No, you can come up if you want.
Oh.
What we're really trying to do is that what they want to do doesn't quite fall in line with what the tier map has established, but the tier map was probably a pretty loose definition anyway by the time we got, finished turning it into the state, because none of the counties really wanted to follow it too specific.
Talking to tier map.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, yeah,
I'm-
No,
Yeah.
no, it's fine. It's
That's
fine.
right.
That's why we're all here.
yeah.
No, the tier map is actually Tier 2A.
2A, okay,
And Tier 2A by statute prevents major subdivision. So therefore, we have to go backwards. This is a rare case of where you're looking at a water and sewer plan amendment that's going from a service category to a non-service category because of the tier mapping. To take it back, we have to take it back to a Tier 3.
Is Fruitland okay with this because it's town transition right now, correct? Which means they plan for the local municipality to take over eventually and supply services. So does Fruitland have any skin in the game as to whether they,
I reached out to, I talked to Mike Gibbons with the town of Fruitland. I believe he's the public works director, and he was okay with this reverting back.
and there's no blowback from the state of Maryland because they've said I was surprised they were that, amicable about it. I really was.
Done this before. We did this with the ponds at Nutters when that was originally planned for a package system. And then it was designated as a Tier 2, and then we had to go back and do a tier amendment to get it back
Okay.
to a 3 because You cannot do a major subdivision on septic in a tier 2. And that's what's happening here. It wouldn't be permitted, the health department wouldn't be.
Just gone through all the proper public notices for the neighbors and et cetera? Or is that after?
This is just our first informational
Okay.
meeting with you. We'll process it further through the water sewer plan amendment. We'd have to do public hearing.
And just from my understanding, is this like more across from like James Landing Road, or is this further down Sharps Point? Or like,
I'm not sure where, this is, it's a few lots east, or I'm sorry, west of the intersection of Sharps Point Road and Riverside Drive Extended.
Just
Okay.
before
On the
you get,
south
it's just
side.
before you get to Village Downriver. It's on the
Yeah.
left-hand side.
okay, yeah,
I think it's parcel, I don't know if you can see parcel numbers, it's parcel 65.
yeah, I can't really tell on the map that's it's in here, but so I guess in general the broad, it's been 13 years since SB 236 with the Sustainable Growth Act Preservation Act. So clearly the state has been wanting us to move really far away from putting more well and septic. We have more and more failing septics all the time. We have issues now with well water of, forget what you talk about the microplastics or the tetrachloroethylene or the, you name it. And then this, of course, is an area where, I know the folks that generally live across from that area, they're not ones to want to keep a lot of other people around them. That probably sounds harsh, but either way. So I guess in general here, does this, why move in that direction, I guess, of going back to well and septic when that's not where the state's at? Why not drop it down to 7 houses? It's a minor, it's legal. I mean, I guess technically this would be a major and we have to make changes or whatever, I suppose. But wouldn't it be better for, how far out is, Fruitland from this? Is it just seems like a situation where we could be getting a lot of blowback from upset neighbors. We could be in a situation where, then the council is going to have to spend money 25 years from now to put in some sort of wastewater treatment plant to hook them up to, if clearly that's not where we're going as a state, that's not, things are getting much worse. The water table is rising. Why would we go back to the horse and buggy when we've already been on the, we got a better system going here. Yeah, we got a fast rail.
Just for clarification, if you're familiar with Riverside Drive, this is basically almost directly across from what is existing Silver Run subdivision. It's on the opposite side of Riverside Drive from Silver Run.
Riverside Drive Extended, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there's a need for the marketplace, I really do.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just the question in my mind is why are we not, like, Fruitland should be jumping in, or, you can't, I know you can't cross the river, even though the wastewater treatment plant for Salisbury is right, not far away, a stone throw. But I don't know. I don't want to see the county in a situation where we're going to have to continue to fund in the state of Maryland to then hook up more septic systems and to provide well water to areas that are, that really, that are going to cause more future problems. It just seems like a headache. Yes, somebody in some LLC will make some money. God bless them. Great. But at the end of the day, the taxpayers are going to get stuck with having to fix a problem, whether that pops up a couple years from now or 25 years from now. But one day or another, we're going to have to then jump in and fix it. So I guess that's where I'm coming from. I'm not really sure how to fully wrestle with all of that. But at the same time, as we've just said, we need housing. We need better stock, and that's a space where we could grow. It just seems like a mistake for Fruitland or even Salisbury to not be trying to jump into that, or as we are trying to then wrestle with our hooking up more septic and wells, systems just for the state or for the county as a whole. So I'll pause there. There's not really a question in that, but as it is, just this is what's on my mind, and I'd rather it'd be one thing, I guess, if it was trying to comply with state law and we were like, okay, let's stick it with 7, and then we don't have as many problems. There's not as much concentration, but this is probably the one issue that I get more folks reaching out to me about, is that we can't drink their damn water because of the issues of bacteria and other kind of things, or chemicals. And why would we allow that, only have to fix it years later?
It's obvious there's a reason behind this, right?
Well, you have a developer that wants to build a development. I remember 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
I think that's where Josh was going, right?
Well, I don't want to overlook the fact that there's a lot of doom and gloom, Josh.
It's needed, though. We need housing.
I mean,
Yeah.
you have neighborhoods, you have some of the best, what we don't have, I think, in this community are enough subdivisions outside of this, you have to build in the city. I think it's a great idea when people can find homes out in the rural area, and they can live out in the rural areas. And the well and septics, they last forever. You have the Nutter subdivision I don't know how old that is, but every house in there is still going strong, and many other neighborhoods as such, so.
Well, they're not building with metal tanks anymore.
Well, the standards are even more extreme
Yeah.
now.
I think he was getting ready to tell us.
Well, I guess originally it was planned to be a larger subdivision with a community sewer system, similar to, I think, what's the development down the road?
Goes down river.
Village Down River, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that was the plan.
That was the original idea, you're right.
I guess financially,
Well, they hit a recession.
yeah.
Yeah, they hit the recession, so
Yeah,
it stopped.
there you go.
Desert tracks, but, no, I mean, I really have never been one, sitting in this position as a county government to create a deterrent for housing development at all. I don't think there's enough of it. And,
So I should have introduced myself for the
Sorry,
record.
yeah,
I
I should.
apologize. Tracy Taylor, Planning Director for Wicomico County.
Alan Harrison, environmental planner.
So one of the things that you'll see now that we've started doing is the attachment that's in there. We're going to start doing an assessment of water and sewer for you to show land use consistency, because that's one of the criterion that MDE requires when they get a water and sewer plan amendment from you. So we've been working with Brian. Yes, originally it was proposed for more lots, package system. That's not probably financially feasible, I'm gathering. So they've scaled back the subdivision, but they've scaled it back to, their own cost-benefit analysis, like how many lots can they get to make this feasible for them. And so this will be one of the rare, to my knowledge, new neighborhoods in the county on well and septic. Most of the residential subdivisions in this area are in keeping with well and septic. This is not within, even though it's a town transition area, it's not within the municipal growth area of Fruitland. They have no plans to annex it or serve it. And I do think that this is outside of the area that they're looking at to serve. It was noted originally, because of its designation in the water sewer plan, it was noted as Tier 2A, plan to be served. The glitch that they're hitting now is that if they go back and don't do a package system, in order to do on-site well and septic, they cannot be, per state law, they can't be a Tier 2A. So it's kind of hard to explain this in a way, except that when the tier map was done for Wicomico County, it was done based off the water and sewer service areas. So the reason why this property was designated as a Tier 2A is simply because it was planned for service at that point. Now, if they're not going to have service, absent the tier map, they probably wouldn't have even had to come to you for a water and sewer plan amendment. They just would have done well and septic. But because it's distinctly attached to the designation on the tier map, they have to ask for the water sewer plan amendment and the tier map amendment to do on-site well and septic for anything over 7 lots. So short of telling them you have to limit your subdivision to 7 lots, there's really no other process for us to go through to enable them to do 10 lots.
The state kind of shoved this down our throat. I
Oh,
remember.
very much so.
We lived through it. And
It
we were
is,
having a lot
it
of
is
debate.
essentially a downzoning by virtue of the law, whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, because that's what put minor subdivisions in your Tier 4, your ag district. You can't do any more than 7 on any one parcel. So, again, what put us in this situation is the existing service areas. That made us map at Tier 2A many years ago. Now, in order to do well and septic, anything over 7, they have to come and ask you for a water sewer plan amendment.
And it was a real overstep, because we had a lot of discussions in this chamber in properties where they were trying to get us to downzone, and the council voted not to downzone because we felt that the owners of the property, we weren't going to impose upon their property rights. You know, somebody has a property, they want to, you know, it's their nest egg, if they want to build 10 houses on it, that could be, that should be, they should be allowed. And the body sitting up here shouldn't, with the, you know, the signature of a pen, just say you can no longer put 10 houses there, now you can only put 5. Well, we pushed back, and there are a lot of agencies in here that evidently went to the state level, and within probably about 2 years, the state turned around, I think it was the O'Malley administration, turned around and said, okay, here's what you're going to do. And they put all these parameters in place with all the tier mapping and you know, and sort of absconded with our you know, local autonomy. That's
Part of those meetings, I remember.
yeah, you
I
do.
remember them well.
That's true,
At the
that's true,
Civic
that's
Center,
true.
I was on the state side then.
Yeah, so.
By the way, that was a Wicomico County man who put that together, Rich Hall.
That's correct.
Yes, Rich
Secretary
Hall, I remember that. Yeah,
That is
was
correct.
I forgot about Rich. So
But
anyway, I think, I'm just glad to see something back on the table again, and that people are able to do what they want with their properties.
I just hope it makes sense. The way I've explained it is that if absent the tier map amendment and which necessitates a water sewer plan amendment, they'll be limited to a minor subdivision, only 7 lots. They cannot do 10. They cannot do 8. So,
I personally probably would rather them move in that direction just for the sense of we are going to have to step in and spend money in the future to fix the problems that they don't want, that whatever this LLC is doesn't want to pay for now. So I'd rather us not do that. It's, you know, we're not that far away from, you know, spaces here where we had to fix because of the tetrachloroethylene or whatever, cycling or whatever it's called. You know, like, we've got all of those issues. We just, I just don't want to see us put ourselves in the future, especially as the water table rises, and, you know, they can't, this only seems to be a future problem than allowing. I'd rather have fewer future problems than more future problems.
Josh, we're making a difference. No bottled water.
One at a time, that's right.
Charlie, where would this go from here? Would it be a resolution?
So at the May 6th meeting, we can have a public hearing that will come in the form of a resolution.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
There you go.
First item on the agenda, which in future council meetings, we'll try to make it the first item on the agenda.
Right.
Right. Board of Education, glad to have you all here today. Thank you.
Wow.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah. Good afternoon.
Y'all like any lunch? Because we have sandwiches in the back. I'll be glad to get them for you.
We appreciate the offer, Mr. Cannon. I think it feels true. Thank you.
Thanks.
Left your big gun in the back wall.
We'll call him up if we need to.
Yeah, you don't want him coming up here.
We've got a lot of information from him before arriving today, so
If you
we're going to
just-
try it on our
For
own.
public, starting
Sure.
on my left, just state your name and your
Yep,
position.
Gene Malone, Chairman of the Board of Education.
Mike Stauffer, Superintendent of Schools.
Ron Rager, Chief Finance and Operations Officer.
Rick Briggs, Chief Academic Officer.
Miles, Assistant Superintendent, Student and Family Services.
Great. Mr. Superintendent, we'll let you
Okay.
start out.
First, thank you for the opportunity. We appreciate the time that we have with you each quarter to come discuss items of interest, many of which you guys have added to the agenda, and then also some of the items that we wanted to discuss as well. It's always a good collaborative discussion. We appreciate that. So the first 4 items are items that were requested from the county council to be on the agenda. So we certainly want to address those, and if you are ready, we can go forward with agenda item number 1. All right, thank you.
Okay. We had a question regarding gift cards and went back through a little bit of history. I believe where this may originally stem is from 2014 Department of Legislative Services audit of Wicomico County Public Schools, there was a finding in there that suggested that WCPS established formal guidelines for the use of purchasing cards, and included with that was the DLS auditors discussed the purchase of gift cards. They indicated that at the state level that's prohibited, but that prohibition doesn't extend to us. They said that's because they're difficult to control and have been a mechanism for committing fraud at other government agencies. The audit, however, didn't indicate what agencies, if they were school systems or even if they were in the state of Maryland where that had occurred, but the audit clearly did not indicate any concerns found in Wicomico County Public Schools. However, we did want to respond to that, and we revised our procurement procedure to specifically address gift cards. And in the procedure at section 9B7, it clearly states gift cards may not be purchased as a gift, award, or incentive for employees or appointed officials of the board. They can be purchased when used as awards and incentives for students, and that is done. And we also created what we call the gift card validation form, which is a tracking mechanism. It tracks every purchase of gift cards from the point that they're requested, usually by a school employee for some kind of incentive, all the way through distribution. Whenever they're handed out, they're signed off on, so we can track those. They may be used as gifts for employees, but only when it's provided from an outside source. So, for example, earlier today, you recognized our Teacher of the Year, and in the package of gifts that the Teacher of the Year received were some gift cards that were donated by local community businesses. They weren't purchased with board funds. That's the only time that an employee might get one in association with the Board of Ed. That prohibition of gift cards for employees is also mentioned 3 other times in that procedure, just to be clear, so that any time someone's in that procedure looking for guidelines, that it's going to be clear that they cannot purchase gift cards for employees. The 2020 DLS audit then went back, and one of the things they do is revisit findings from previous years. And in that 2020 audit, there was no mention of gift cards in that report. And according to their report, findings that were not repeated in 2020 were found to be satisfactorily addressed. So they seem to be satisfied with how we revised our procedure and are tracking them through the gift validation form. In the current year, we have 179 instances for last year, FY24, the most recent completed year, there were a total of 179 instances of gift card purchases. Only 16 of them came from the state funding that we get, and those are for PBIS, or positive behavior, and attendance incentives. 32 came from school activity funds, which are fundraisers that the schools do. There's not coming from any county or state funds. It's, they're selling the Joe Cordy pizza. And those were given primarily for students who were essay contest winners and additional incentives and prom prizes. And the remaining 131 were from grants. Again, most of these for incentives for positive behavior and for attendance. And all 179 instances of these gift purchases were for students, not for employees. Yes, sir.
You know where this came from, right? Gene does.
I do.
Thank you for addressing this. And this has popped up in the county. We've got an issue that I don't know if you call it an issue, but we're looking at some things. You say you have a form that they have to fill out?
Yes, sir.
Could you email that to Laura?
Certainly.
Because we may sometime in the future, depending on where we go with that.
Absolutely. There were obviously some concerns that were raised in 2014. Really proud of the fact that there was quite a bit of effort put into this the last number of years, and that we came away with a clean audit on that in 2020 for that purpose. And then you can see here what was reported. The procedures that we've added have been quite extensive, and we've been following them now for quite a few years.
I was telling some of the fellow council members, and I don't know what year it was, but they were buying gift cards from Victoria's Secrets and giving them to senior students. And they admitted doing that, I mean, that was, there's a line you draw somewhere.
Yeah, I think that goes back to that about 10 years ago, 10 or 11 years.
So anyway.
And that's something we'd catch with that validation form now, because
Yeah.
clearly they have to put not only who they're purchasing for and how much, but also where they're being purchased from.
I think it was one of the, either mayor or city councilman in Baltimore actually got booted out of office because of gift cards. They were buying gift cards or.
And that's why really, like we said, when it comes to staff, we don't do any of that. That all comes through business donations or something that they have a fund that they give to or something like that at the beginning of the year, and then for the purpose of if someone, gets married or has a child or something like that. So that's all done through just all outside entities, donations and other things. All right.
Very comprehensive. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Beaver Run Elementary. So we came prepared to talk about a couple of things with Beaver Run, but certainly if there's anything additional that you'd like to talk about, we are looking at adding a 2-classroom addition onto Beaver Run as a part of the major project, and a continuation on that, and then also talk a little bit about just pre-K and some of the enrollment that we've seen there at Beaver Run Elementary in particular. So if we look there at Beaver Run, do you want to start, Brian, and talk a little bit about the two classroom addition?
Sure. So we had a little over $2 million remaining in the bond funds for Beaver Run after we wrapped it up. As many of our projects do, we're really proud that they're on time, typically under budget, and due to enrollment increases and also the enrollment increase due to just the traditional, moving and new students coming in. We also have the blueprint, which has increased the pre-K. So we're teaching about 750 students in pre-K now. Lack of space at Beaver Run to accommodate that. The building was designed before Blueprint, didn't have the classrooms for those students. So we were lucky in the fact that we had those bond funds remaining. So went back to our original architect of record. They did the design. We approved a construction manager at the last board meeting, and we'll be working on that beginning this summer with the rooms opening up in the fall of '27.
It's very much a need. We have about 730 students at Beaver Run right now. We have 8 classes for kindergarten, 8 classes for first grade, and 8 classes for second grade. We only have 6 for pre-K. We have 120 current pre-K students that go to Beaver Run, but we also have to transport another 20 students from Beaver Run to Fruitland Primary because there's no room to house them. And they're Tier 1 students, which are income eligible, which we have to provide service. So our wonderful transportation department has to go and pick them up in the Beaver Run catchment area and deliver them to Fruitland Primary, where we had some additional space in a portable, not brick and mortar space.
I think pre-K is probably the best advance we can make in education. I never used to think that, but pre-K is so necessary, like what they learn at that young age, whether it's emotional, social, or educational.
Absolutely. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but just to follow up on that, in an area like Wicomico County where there are a number of students that are what the state would call Tier 1 students or students of poverty or maybe special education needs or multilingual learner needs, it is a game changer to be able to get them into a public education setting a year earlier, where most likely in their own homes, if they had been there another year longer, they would have been without that education opportunity. So that is certainly helpful to do that, but obviously we've also added another grade level to our existing 24 schools that we've always had prior to adding that grade level. So think about the challenge in doing that. I want to give kudos to not only Dr. Reger, but his entire team, Liesl Ashby, Kayla Campbell, and the entire planning and construction team, because with construction costs the way they are, to do a large-scale project, $50+ million project like Beaver Run over that time period, and then be able to come in about $2 million under budget, and then again, turn that around so quickly and utilize that as an extension of the project to add 2 more classrooms, which are much needed space, really is, I think, a tremendous effort. So
it's a real eye-opener being on the school building commission. It's a real eye-opener to hear these people one-on-one testimonies of exactly what maneuvering they had to do to save money and how they made it successful. And they do it continuously.
All the time.
Yeah.
All right, so that is Beaver Run Elementary. How about student enrollment update? I'm going to look down to Mrs. Miles. We've obviously had a large increase in student enrollment here in Wicomico County. So.
We have Dr. Stauffer, as of Yesterday, we had 15,629 students in the morning. We had 15,632 in the afternoon. We're going to stick with 15,629 because that's what I did all the calculations on, and I didn't go back and redo them. We talk about at-risk, and we're talking about students who are either eligible for farms, free and reduced meals, or special education service, or are multilingual. And when we say at risk, it means that without the benefit of what we can provide through the farms program, through special ed, or through multilingual services, they may not have the same opportunities or accesses as other students. With that definition in mind, remember I just said 15,629, 11,266 of that 15,629 total, 72.1% of our students fall into at least one category. That's no duplication. So 72% of our student population either farms eligible, receiving special education services, or are multilingual. So that kind of gives an overarching picture of the need for the services that are provided.
Didn't they change the farms formula a few years ago to make a lot more people, a lot more children eligible for that?
I don't feel that I could respond to a lot more, but I know the formula changed, the criteria, and that is federally established.
I think another change you may be referring to is the CEP, the Community Eligibility Provision, which allows us to provide the free meal to all students, not just those who we traditionally qualified as free and reduced meal.
Honestly, if we went back to the application process for free and reduced meals, we believe strongly, just with our own experience, that number would probably be a little higher, believe it or not, compared to what it was before, using the same guidelines as it was before. Give you an idea. When it comes to what the state would term at risk, which is you are a student within one of those three groups: student of poverty, student with a disability, or a student that's learning English as a second language. We are among the highest in the state of Maryland, in Wicomico County, one of the highest.
So if a student is learning a foreign language student, and that's the only thing do they automatically qualify for the farm?
No, talking about
Considered at risk.
They're considered at risk. They're considered being at a higher risk of not graduating high school because they are coming to us without knowing the English language, or they're a student with a disability or student.
They meet one criteria, they don't automatically meet the other two.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Correct. And that 11,266, that number represents students who met at least one.
Mm-hmm.
Many within that number may have met more than one, but those met at least one. So looking at a couple of these areas, back in October when I had the opportunity to share some of this same information with you, just kind of a little point of comparison. So if we look at our multilingual learners, in October, there were 1,507 as of this same time period. We're talking as of Monday's date, actually, 2,328. So that's 15% of our student body, which means nothing if you look at it as a number. It means a lot if you look at it in terms of services and supports that we need to provide for these students to help them have the greatest opportunity to be successful, and as Dr. Stauffer referenced, make it to that point of graduation, which is our Tier 1 responsibility. Families in transition or our homeless students and shared residents. I shared a little bit about that back in October as well. We have 690, or 4.5% of our student population, who are identified as homeless. I emphasize identified because those are the families that we are being made aware of. There may be some families who have not shared with us, but of those that we're aware. The shared residents, this is very interesting. Just a quick recap, these are families who do not have their own lease or mortgage. They are living with another person or another family for any number of reasons. 1,703, 11% of our students are living in a shared residence situation. Very interesting because that is a direct reflection, in my opinion, of housing availability, housing affordability, and provision of service in the community. So something just to keep in mind. Special education, the last area I wanted to touch on. So a little bit of an increase. As of October, we had 1,774. As of this week, we have 1,836, so an increase of 62 students, so just under 12%, 11.7% of our students are receiving special ed service along the range of services, from the least amount of service identified through an IEP through the greatest amount of a self-contained or intensive service provision. Additionally, we have 740 students who receive support through a 504. They're not identified as special education, but there are services or accommodations, rather, that are necessary to be implemented to ensure that these students have the greatest opportunity to access their instruction without limitation. So lots of numbers, and I don't expect you to remember them. There's no quiz, but using those as points of reference, because I don't want to minimize this in any way. A student is not about a dollar, but a dollar is for a student. And I think it's very important that everyone understands the needs that are present in our schools for our students, and how what we receive is turned right around to deliver to meet those needs. I think that's most important.
Yeah, I think that's something that everyone's had at least, mostly, right, 13 years of education experience. So we face that a lot, and I've never had 13 years of law enforcement experience or business experience or whatever it may be, but everyone's had, K through 12 public education for the most part. At least a lot of people have. And I think it's very different today when you think about those demographics, and going back to 72% of our students are in at least one of those categories, which means it's very challenging to get them to the finish line to be able to support them. They're at risk of not graduating high school, which means it takes a tremendous amount of resources to be able to get them to that finish line. It's no longer the one teacher in front of the class of 30 students that's going to work for all almost 16,000 students that we have. In fact, that doesn't work for 72% of those almost 16,000 students when you look at that. So I think it's important to really think about what those numbers mean and what those demographics mean. On top of that, when you look at that, those numbers that Mrs. Miles shared, 15,629, we only projected a little under 15,200 students, using all of the state data, our data, the census data, everything that all of your departments provide us, and everything else. So we've had 400 plus more students show up in our school system this year than we had planned for. And a lot of them are the multilingual learner students for the most part, the majority, because they're coming in to the county and they're not coming through the general type of census data that we were tracking through pre-K providers and all of the other things that our great team looks at. So that provides a challenge when you think about that. What do we expect next September? And what will that mean? Knowing that, again, we have the same number of facilities that we have today with 15,629 students, we have the same number of schools as we had 20 years ago with 14,000 students. Think about what that looks like and how that feels like, and that's the kind of information we just are trying to help our elected leaders understand and our community to understand some of the challenges that our teachers are facing.
Yeah, and I don't know how when I hear these numbers, it makes me very, very nervous. Because you're talking about just the 400 alone. That's an elementary school,
yes.
Complete elementary school.
Yes, it is.
But it's not just a complete elementary school. it's a complete elementary school of children who may need one-on-one teaching. Because I don't know how you're separating all this out, because if they don't speak English, what exactly is going on? Because, and I'm serious, this is not, I'm not, this isn't rhetorical.
Yeah, no.
How are you addressing this? Because if you have 5 students in one classroom of 30 that cannot speak English, how do you teach them? Or are these students being put in one classroom with a bilingual teacher? What's happening?
Great
Because
question.
I know the expenses are astronomical.
Astronomical. So, Dr. Briggs, maybe you start, and I can certainly chime in. But we do it a little differently depending on the grade levels and the age of the students, if they're elementary versus high school.
Okay.
I'll start at the elementary level because, like in the primary grades, all students are learning the English language, right?
Okay.
Some have it in their home, but they're all kind of learning. So there, it's more where we just push in supports. So we might have an ML teacher that comes in to support the kindergarten or first grade teacher. But when we get up to the middle and high school years, we do have what we call sheltered classrooms, where it would just be students who are learning the English language in a math class, or just students who are learning the English language in an English class as well. So think of it pretty much a continuum. In the early years, more learning with their peers. Where at the high school level, we, like in the Shoemaker complex, we have an early newcomer center. So students who are just coming to the country for the first time and are really trying to learn, it doesn't make sense for them to be in a high school regular classroom setting. So it's a mix.
How do you get to the math and sciences if they haven't figured out English?
It's hard. Translation services, they are learning the English language. They might not be proficient, but you'd be surprised. They do pick it up quickly with supports from our own teachers, some of whom are bilingual, but many of whom are not. And I've just learned the strategies and tools to help those students learn.
And technology is a piece of that as well, right? So all of the different languages, I think we have 27 roughly, almost 30 different languages being spoken in our schools by our students. So as Dr. Briggs said, if there are a 10th grade student just coming to us for the first time, not knowing English, it doesn't make sense to put them in a classroom with 28 other biology students, right, that are trying to learn biology. So that's how we utilize that large modular by the Ward Museum, between Parkside and the Ward Museum there. So they're learning English, but they're also learning some of the content in their own content or their own language through technology while learning English at the same time and doing a little bit of everything. And then, as he said, if they're coming to us at the age of 4, then many times the push-in services and others, as all the other students are learning to read and write at the same time, work well for that.
I'm with you, Mr. Cannon. I don't know what if we have another growth year like that. I mean, these guys will figure it out, but it would keep me awake at night. That's 25 more classrooms we need with that number of students. Figure teachers, assistants. What if that happens again? I don't know. We'll find a place for them, but there'll be more portables than you can count right now sitting on these schools.
Just a quick question on trying to understand we're still importing teachers into the state. Is that correct?
We are mostly a majority import state, yes. So
it was like 30%, I remember, like pre-COVID roughly, or was that rough, if I remember right?
I would say this from the numbers, and I'm thinking back to some of the state meetings I've been in, for the most part, we are well under when it comes to, College Park and Towson and Salisbury University. They are not producing anywhere near the number of teachers that are needed within the state. So we are bringing them in from other states like Delaware and Pennsylvania and other places quite a bit.
Well, I guess just on that note, I don't know how we rank compared to other areas as far as, you mentioned like the multiple languages, close to 30 languages you spoke. I mean, some dialects of one language can be so very different that you need to have someone who understands that. I guess, I don't know if there's anything more. I saw that, that of course SU's, their enrollment is down fairly dramatically over time. I don't know if there's more things that we can do to put pressure on the state to try to get more recruitment, to have more diverse, in all the ways that you can, more diverse educators produced at Salisbury University so that we can utilize them here if we are which I suspect a bit much differently than the rest of the state when it comes to.
Right, I know we could talk about this topic for quite a while, but with Blueprint, there were a number, during this legislative session, we were watching it very closely because there were a number of concerns with continuing to expand Blueprint, the scope of what that means, and not only not really providing the funding levels that it takes to kind of complete and do all of that and implement all of that, but also at the same time not even really having the resources, the staffing to be able to do that. So I know you've heard collaborative time was one thing, if you've been reading with it, by how they've delayed that a couple of years. Well, that really, to make that work and work right, you have to have a large influx of staff to be able to meet the requirements. And we're already, suffering from not having the number that we need produced. We have, I think in Wicomico, we've done well to be able to fill the vacancies that we have, but certainly not to the point where we can, through Blueprint, add even additional positions with the resources that we currently have.
The state realized that they had to do a total reset on Blueprint.
I'm going to say
That could be a long
I'm going
conversation.
to say that they do not realize it. I think there's many at the state level that are pushing forward. That's from where I sit.
Agreed. Good. All right, number 4.
So you'll recall back in 2020, 2021, we received a couple rounds of COVID grant funding. We did, I think, a really good job in our school district where we were required to spend 20%, at least 20% on instruction. We spent a large amount of the funds, majority of it, on capital funds, capital projects rather, that were applicable under the regulations of the COVID grants. Windows and door projects, HVAC projects. Those were all completed. We did have 2 that we were holding retainage on, about $1.2 million. And of course, that's pretty important to hold that retainage back so we can have the contractors come back and fix up anything that's not going quite right. But the projects had been completed really prior to the state doing its last extension of a COVID grant. The state applied for an extension. Several counties are having a harder time spending out their funds. We took advantage of that just to hold the retainage a little bit longer in the best interest of the taxpayers of Wicomico County. Then on March 28th, every chief school executive in the country received a letter from the Secretary of Education saying, despite the extensions that were granted last August, your ability to receive any additional COVID funds expires on March 28th. And that letter was received at 5:03 on March 28th. So in essence, cutting it off immediately. That's putting us in that hole, having to cover that $1.2 million of retainage. The contractors have done the work. We certainly want to pay them. The intent was to pay them and get the money reimbursed from the state via those COVID funds. We are, of course, going to pay that. It is going to be a bit of a hardship, but you will, I do say this to tell you to expect to see coming up a little bit later this spring out of category budget transfer that will allow us to cover that. We're not going to come to you and ask you to cover that. We do have the ability to cover that, but it will require that out of county transfer. Or I'm sorry, out of category transfer.
And we are going through the allowable appeals and other things at the state level, and I know the state is doing that at the federal level. Yeah. So our hope is that we'll be able to minimize that a lot more.
16 states have filed suit about this, the letter, and Maryland is one of those. So we have a couple different avenues between the appeals, and then we'll see whatever happens through the courts.
All right.
The budget.
Ready?
Yeah.
All right.
You're ready.
Last one.
It's getting late, though.
Well, we can make this short as long as you like, Mr. Cannon. No. So maintenance of effort is based off of enrollment. Okay, so I know you're going to say, well, that number went up. Well, remember the 600 plus more students that we received on September 1st that we did not have prior to the prior September 1st. That's just, so that, I always say that's the same, it's an increase, but it's the same amount because it's the same exact amount per student. And I think that's very important to understand. It's the same exact amount per student. We just have a lot more students. That's the only reason that top number went up. The request, in addition to that, you see there is about $2.5 million. That is our request based on a couple of factors. One, as you heard earlier today from County Executive, inflation went up 2.8%. That's, again, if you look at the top number, maintenance of effort, and then a big chunk of that bottom number, the second number, which is inflation, that's just us saying, look, guys, we're going to try really hard to do our very best to do the exact same thing we did last year. Because it's no more money per student, it's the same amount. We obviously have to have more teachers for more students, so it's going to be, you're basically spending that same amount with those two numbers. So when we look at other inflationary factors, I want to give you just a couple. Our utility costs, just like for the county, our utility costs went up $1.2 million. Just utility costs. Look at property insurance, you look at fuel prices, and some of those other insurance and some of those other costs, technologies, health insurance, all of that is what would be covered in that 2.8% factor that was in addition to the maintenance of effort amount. So the same amount plus the inflation amount, and that gets you the exact same thing that you were doing the year before. No more, no less. And then the other piece that we did request in that $55 million amount is a 2% investment. We're calling that a 2% reinvestment. If you look down of that, all of those icons there at the bottom, that's where that 2% investment will go. Okay, school safety and student discipline. We want to be able to continue to improve that. When you look at that, like I had talked about earlier with the demographics, we have more students of poverty. We have more students with special education needs. Okay, if you think about that over the last couple of decades, you know, with some of the area centers closing, the Holly Center, right? The Maple Shade, Eastern Shore Psychological, all of those needs are within our school system now that we are required to meet and require more staff and more resources to be able to meet those needs. Class size is a huge one. And in fact, probably you could add up all of those other 8 icons there, and class size would probably still be the biggest one when you add them all up. Over the years, what we've done in Wicomico County is we have just increased class sizes. As more students have enrolled, as I said earlier, we still have the same 24 schools we had back after Salisbury Middle was built. That was the last one, the last new one. So all of those students have come in, all of those portables, and we've not had really the funding increases over time locally. Blueprint doesn't cover any of that stuff. We've not had the funding to really adequately provide the number of teachers that we've needed to provide. So if our class sizes were 22, 23, 15 years ago, they are now 27, 28, and 29, 15 years later. On top of that, you look at how the demographics have changed over that same 15-year span. All of the students with disabilities, all of the multilingual learners, all of the higher percentages of students with poverty, you start to get a picture of Wicomico County Public Schools today versus Wicomico County Public Schools 15 years ago. So we would ask that you take a look at those things. Local funding provides for every single thing that you see listed here. School climate, class size, athletics and extracurricular activities, our arts and music programs, technology and materials of instruction, field trips and other experiences and opportunities, world language and elective subjects that many of us enjoyed in school, transportation, and the increase in costs there. And then, of course, the support staff. Blueprint provides for increases in salaries for our teachers, but nothing for the other 1,000 employees that we have that support those teachers each day, along with the benefits and the insurance and other things that go with that. So all of these things are pictured here to kind of give you an idea of where the money would go. If you're asking, well, why couldn't you just do one-time funding, or why do you need this 2% increase? These are the things why. Listed them here, so we can start to reduce class sizes again to get to a more manageable number for our teachers and for the demographic of students that we're trying to educate each day, so that we can continue to provide those layers of intervention. Our alternative education center is the same size it was 30 years ago. We need to continue to add to those things. As we have more needs, we need to add more layers of support and intervention, alternative education programming, and other things. Extracurricular, and to continue doing those things. You've seen the news all around the state. Counties are cutting summer programs, after-school programs, sports, fine arts, even those really close to us, Dorchester and some other counties, because of the situation we're finding us in. What's happened is Blueprint has added a ton of requirements, all great things. You said so earlier, pre-K is a game changer. But we've added a whole nother grade level of students to the same spaces we had before all that, right? Continuing, you said earlier, Josh, recruiting and retaining, how do you do that? Well, you have to maintain competitive salaries with other areas and other states. It takes a tremendous amount when you look at the fact that we have 1,400 teachers. So when you move the needle a little bit, multiply that by 1,400, and it becomes a lot. So Blueprint is, the state money is being used for that. The state money 20 years ago probably covered some of these things that are pictured on this sheet, but they're no longer covering it for that. It's being pushed onto the school system and the local areas to be able to do. I think we've made the case before that we've not quite kept up with education funding like we probably needed to over the last 15 years. I think the county executives put forward our request. I think our request is very reasonable when you look at what it would go toward and what it would accomplish. These are all reoccurring costs. So things that would need to go into the regular funding formula. These are well needed. These are what we're hearing from our community and our parents, are things that they want to see us either be able to continue to provide or expand upon. And I do appreciate the county executive putting forward that in her budget, and we would certainly ask the county council to support that as we move forward. We think it is something that we will be able to continue to grow from, and you can see, I think, as we've shown and recently, at least with this team here, we are really good stewards, and so is the teams that are behind us of taxpayer money. We can let you know that these services are what that funding would go toward, and I think that's something that would really help continue to improve the education system here in Wicomico.
Yeah, how many buses do you have in your transportation department now? County-owned buses?
Would it be okay if I get back with that number? Because I don't know off the top of my head.
Well, you can get back to me on it. What I was referring to is, 20 years ago, probably 95% of our transportation were done by contractors.
It's probably 50-50 now.
Yeah.
It's not a business that we want to get into at all.
You sure got in it.
We sure do, because our parents wanted us to continue to be able to provide transportation for our students. But
I think that the contractors were providing.
We know we've put those contracts out to bed, and they are not taking them.
The only time we take on a new bus and a new route is when we do not have a contractor to take it.
Yeah. We really have. We would much rather not get in that business because that means that that's additional responsibility for us. They're not taking the short routes, and as more of the of the student population has pushed in towards Salisbury, those routes are much shorter. That means the time on the buses is much shorter,
you're
and the
not paying
mileage
enough.
that they're traveling is much shorter.
I say maybe you're not paying enough to attract them. That might be the problem, you know.
Well,
Could be.
They can put
you
that
see
in place, too.
transportation is on here, so
No,
thank
yeah, I
you,
know,
Mr.
but,
Holloway.
you know.
We appreciate that, but no.
But
We're certainly competitive with other school districts around us are paying, and in fact, we're probably a little better, but we're a little bit more of a urban center, I guess you would say. And
previous administrations really pushed you into the bus business. I mean, I understand that before you were here, so,
Yeah.
anyway.
maybe so.
I've always been part of the old guard on maintenance of effort, always been, but I think. the
Understand
times changed,
that.
But I think we need to step up our game. I think more investments are necessary.
Well, and
I
we,
honestly do.
and I think we have, if you can come to the State of the Schools, I mean, we're having, this team, our school system is having a lot of successes. We're able to really do some things, and I think I'm pretty excited about some of our proposals for next year regarding the expansion of alternative education and providing some more non-traditional learning pathways in our school system, and some of the things that we really need more of, as well as the expansion of fine arts, extracurricular activities, the middle school sports. We are involving hundreds and hundreds of students that did not have that opportunity just a couple of years ago. And it truly, if you look at our discipline, our attendance rates, and our GPA levels in our middle schools, it has just that one little thing has made such a big difference.
How do we go from, not to change the subject, but how do we go from needing to forward money for Fruitland to now not?
So you're talking for the construction for Fruitland
Yes.
Primary. I'm going to do my best, and if you need some more information, I can get it. Liesl couldn't be here today. But in essence, what it comes down to, and I think Pam did a pretty good job of trying to explain it earlier, is that as we worked with the IAC, they're providing more funding for us in FY26 than what we were initially anticipating.
An acronym. Not everybody knows what
I'm sorry, the Interagency Commission on School Construction, which is
State
a
of Maryland.
state body that provides funding for capital projects. They're providing, I think it was 12 million when we were initially looking at 5, and don't quote me on that, but it's around those numbers. So since we're getting more from them in FY26, that's going to meet our cash flow needs as we look to break ground this summer and begin construction. Doesn't mean that we won't need some forward funding in the future years, but at this point we're in a good place. I think that's good for the county. It saves them from having to go out to bond and incur any interest on funds. We would get that paid back from the state, but the state won't pay back any interest. So it's a positive thing.
And Councilman Baker, I was going to say, I'll go back to our team. They have been relentless at the state level, as other counties have not spent to the dollar what they were allocated, and there is some of that balance remaining. They have been relentless in going after that with the IAC. And I also give kudos to our delegation. We had a meeting with them. Mary Beth, Senator Carrozza was very instrumental. We laid out some of the funding concerns we had with capital, and she has done a great job of advocating for us at the state level with this last legislative session. So I think that is why you see our allocation from the state. I think it was around 5 originally, or like 5.5 million, and we're now over 12 million. So that has all come from those efforts there.
As you all know, I'm a big proponent of Fruitland. What I don't want to have happen next year is us to be in a situation where we have a school half built and we have to bust the revenue cap because we can't have a school half built.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of looking towards, when I heard the county executive say that today, I was like, how's that going to work next year?
We're in a better place. We were going into this year, so go back a few months ago when we were looking at that 5 point whatever million from the IC. We were anticipating having to have forward funding for this year and next year. Now we've taken this year off the table. So at the end of the day, we're in a much better place now than what we were.
And while this has been a great meeting, and I appreciate that. While we're on that topic, Councilman Baker, I would only be remiss if I did not remind the council that yes, the voters did put in place the revenue cap, but they also put in place the revenue cap with the contingency that if it needed to be broken, it could only be broken for one reason and one reason only, and
That's
that
not
was for
correct.
education.
That's not correct.
Okay.
Norm Conway got that passed in Annapolis.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Well,
voters didn't do that.
Maybe that, and I didn't mean to bring up a sore subject, Mr. Holloway, but that is my
I mean,
understanding
you
of
sit here and say this,
that-
and people are listening to it
Yeah.
on TV. I just,
Well, I thought that is the truth. You have a revenue cap at 2%, but it can be.
yeah,
it can
and Norm
bust.
Conway got that done in Annapolis.
Well,
The
how-
voters didn't vote for that.
Well, I have to look, but Joe, you're teaching me something too, so I have to look that up.
It's in the state law.
It is in the state law.
Yeah, it's not in the county law. it's in
So it
the
was
state
never
law.
done through, so the actual busting the revenue cap was never done through referendum in Licking
No,
County?
it's a state law.
State law.
Okay, see? I didn't know.
But that was good, though.
Told you so.
I appreciate that. I like my best effort. I like my best
No,
effort.
Hey,
I appreciate it.
That's it.
Yeah,
While
thank
we're,
you, guys.
while
You
we're
have any?
on
Yes.
Construction. How's Mardella coming along? It's looking real good.
Absolutely, it does. It'll ready to go by the start of school this fall.
So are you in phase 4 now?
Yes.
Okay.
Finishing up phase.
are you also, oh, go ahead.
And my understanding is
Well, you
you're gonna,
need-
the buses are going to enter and exit off of Sharptown Road?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
All subject to the building energy performance standards, the 35,000 square foot buildings, where you have to follow all types of state standards in reference to environmental conditions.
From what I understand, when I went to a seminar on that for the bank, if it's a public building, like a county office building or school, church, we're not. But that's what we were told at this seminar, but what's going to come out in final rating, I don't know.
Those buildings at.
Matt Drew came in.
The 35,000, you get it. Yeah, you get an exemption if you're a government building, school building, church. It's not going to, it's for private enterprise.
Yeah, Matt came in and we had a work session with him, but I couldn't remember whether the public was obligated, under that
I
obligation.
don't think the schools will fall under that.
Okay.
They will fall under the exemption.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your
Thank you all
time.
for your
Thank you,
time.
Dr. Sutton.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?